Okay, yeah, now I'm going to get in trouble.
All right, hello. Welcome to Product Tank. I'm delighted to come in the middle of the bus because I haven't been to one of these for ages and now I'm introduced two in a row. We're about to go. You're alive? Are we live? Yes. We're alive. Hi, everyone. We're live. We've got a bunch of people in the room here at Trophy and hopefully a few people more involved. So welcome. We've got a couple of talks for you today. One both on discovery and one on from a sort of startup perspective and one established company perspective. I'm really interested to see the Trophy one in particular because I used to work here and so see kind of how it's moved along in the 5 years that I haven't been here. It was pretty new and unfamiliar when I was here. So it's matured a lot in that time. But also really interested in the startup perspective as well. So I will hand over quickly to I will chat that first and say thank you to our sponsors. One product manager, Aurora, panel, Venture, and Trophy for hosting us in the video. Round of applause for the sponsors. Right, and now, now I will hand over to Aurora.
My name is Nicole Williams. I'm the product marketplace here at Trophy, and thanks for coming. Hopefully you enjoy the talk to at least one of them and go experiencing it. So just some really brief housekeeping for the 55% of you that haven't already worked here and told me that you already know your way around the office. The bathrooms, if you keep past the kitchen, you'll see a long corridor. The men first, female second. If we do have an emergency, we'll be gathering at the ground floor to set the first floor. To get to the stairwell, you just come down where you entered and you keep walking until you get to the right door. We will know how to get out. Those are the main housekeeping things. Oh. Going good. Should I do something? Awesome. Wait, because it's only happening to me, not you. This is probably all right. So I'll just keep talking. We'll continue with the thing that I was showing you about how to switch screens, because sometimes random things happen, and otherwise I'll do the AD. So my next thing is like say we've got roles here at Trophy. If you're interested in them, we've got a senior product manager at who is a paid training role looking at the strategy and customer experience across our apps and iOS and Android. A senior product owner role in infrastructure and a product owner role in marketing platform. Cool. All right, that'll just be that cool. You can apply at Trade.me, which is trade.me/careers. Because we don't take ourselves too seriously, also want to point out that like we have free food, that comes with phone risks, and so there is all those things to think about. We've also got clients when we're trying to map it out. All right. Now, I have the pleasure of handing over to our first speaker, who is Janine, Senior Product Manager at Trophy in our client space. She's going to tell you all about this thing called customer discovery and how we do it at Trophy. So let's give her a massive welcome up to the stage.
Yeah, so today I'm here to talk to you about this thing on the wall called findability and take you on a bit of a journey through our product processes. And yeah, your speakers for today our learnings from doing intensive discovery into a really complex topic of findability. And this was done over just over a quarter or 3 month period. Yeah, so what you will learn today from this chat is we're going to be talking about combining insights from different sources is very powerful. You can use your data for research as well. We'll come to that word smidge in a minute. You'll get to know what it means. There is strength in diverse, focused, cross-functional teams, and it was worth spending time to really understand the problem space to dive deep into heaps of opportunities. Yeah, and so as product people in this room, we all have a good problem, right? And our big problem was we didn't really understand our customer journey and marketplace. We had, the words improve findability in our strategy, but it felt like a made-up word. I didn't really understand what that meant. So what do we do about it? Yeah, well, the first thing is, how big of a problem is this? And it turns out we have over 4 million customers doing 5 million searches a day and 1.3 monthly app users. It's a lot. We've got a really big problem on our hands if we're trying to match the right buyer to the right seller. So where did we start with this whole thing? Well, we started with a research brief that was incredibly brief. We just started with these 2 questions here. What's our customer journey and where are the pain points they're experiencing along that journey so we can really target them? And the other thing that we wanted to look at was, what does findability actually mean? We'd heard it said around the office a lot, but we really wanted to explore what does that word mean? So the first thing we did in our discovery process is we did a bit of desk research. And so we started trying to define, what is findability? And so I found a bit of an example from a website which said, oh yeah, findability. That's when someone is actually looking for information. They have intent to find information. And then we found out about this word called discoverability, which was how easy is it for someone to find things, they didn't explicitly seek out. And when I thought about my experience at TradeMe, we tended to mix the 2 together of findability and discoverability to go, hey, findability is every way a person finds things. So we managed to narrow down our definition straight away, which was really helpful. And then once we started using these terms, we really dug it into stakeholders and the teams, and now you'll hear them using findability and discoverability in all these weird ways. Like there was a real example where it was like, I didn't know that there were hoodies on TradeMe because it was a promo stripe. We're like, that's discoverability now. So we really took some time to define that. Then to answer these really big problems, because obviously, there's a lot of people trying to find the right thing on TradeMe, we needed to gather insights from, a wide range of sources. So what we did is we got all the people we needed together as one team. So I guess you've experienced this in the past where you've had to try and grab resources from, your UX research team, your data scientists, and, your analytics team. And what we did is we brought them together into one, I want to call it a mega product studio. You've probably heard of that, when you've got a product manager, a designer, and a lead software engineer working together. But what we did is we really pulled a big team together, including things like delivery and analytics and research, to form this superpowered team. And what we found is that if you bring everyone into one team, you'll have a common goal, and you'll be able to speed up your productivity like there's no tomorrow. Or whether it was quantitative research to jump into the data. And so I'm going to take a bit of time to go into a topic that I don't think people necessarily think of when they think of discovery. And we think maybe you guys might find this useful as well. So we're going to look a little bit at data because, TradeMe, like most companies that would be here, you've probably got a lot of data just sitting around. And we've got, at TradeMe, we've got a lot of analytics. But what we find is when you've got a whole bunch of aggregated data, you can lose the flavor of what, the individual human is doing, right? And so we've really got to start thinking about, well, yeah, having that big data is useful, but also thinking about the small details is quite helpful as well. So for an example of this, if we're constantly looking into aggregated data, we might miss things. We could say, 30% of searches end up doing about 7 searches a day. But that doesn't really tell you if, 10% of customers do 1 search and give up, or is it 10% of customers doing 30 searches and giving up? And then why are they giving up? Are they giving up because they couldn't find the right thing? Or is it because they were looking for lots of different things when they were doing all those 7 searches? You just don't really know. So what do we do about this? Well, here's that word smidge again. We started looking at individual buyer journeys. So yeah, Emma did a really fantastic job onto this. She found all the timestamp data for customers that she could, obviously anonymized it, from our clickstream search data, our behavioral and transactional data, and followed a few customer journeys to see exactly what they were doing when they were finding something. And yeah, she likes a good acronym, so she called this a smidge, which I thought sounded pretty cool. We call that a single member, which is our word for customer, in-depth granular exploration. So yeah, this is just really following that customer journey. And it's important to remember that, this isn't statistically significant, right? You're just looking at an individual member. However, what it does give you is like when you're talking to someone in a customer interview, you get to, empathize with what they're doing. And we were able to do this by looking at every single action that they were taking. And what we did with this was we formed some hypotheses as to, what was going on. So in this example over here, this is a customer that tried 21 different searches to find a headlight. And so once they'd done that, they went to our question and answers when they found the right thing, and they go, oh, is this going to fit the right thing? You're like, oh my goodness. We've built a lot of empathy going through that customer's journey. And so that led us to, hey, customers might have, trouble what they're looking for is one of our hypotheses. But the other thing we noticed is, hey, customers tend to repeat themselves in this process. Or another hypothesis was, hey, maybe this is a little bit frustrating, our search experience, right, if you have to do all that. And these are things that we already had suspected. However, when you get into this detail, you really build that empathy. And I guess when you've done customer interviews, there's so much power in this as well as those. So from here, we took some of those hypotheses and really explored them even further with more discovery. So we used a variety of sources to learn about our problems and our opportunities. So the first one that we did was we talked to 21 customers about their experience with finding things on site. We asked them, hey, can you find a desk? Can you find a piece of outdoor furniture? And they would tell us what they were thinking. We saw some of those patterns that we saw just before. We also did some data analysis to size up some of the opportunities that we were seeing to go, well, how big is this problem? We also did a whole bunch of internal desk research. So, lots of people in this room have worked at Trade Me, and we know we've done a whole bunch of experiments, right? There is so much learning within our company. You just got to go find it. So what we did is we went around the wiki and we pulled from several different sources to figure out what have we already learned, so we didn't relearn the same thing. We also did some stakeholder interviews. So there are some companies like eBay or in really intense search experiences. So we wanted to interview them and see what can we learn from them. We also did some external research and looked at other companies and what they were doing to compare ourselves, as well as a bit of a UX audit, which you might not have heard of. But that was us analysing how does our experience live up to customer expectations, and what principles in UX are we doing well at, and what are we not doing so well at. So yeah, we pulled all these things together, all these different insights, and what did we get out of it? We got an opportunity tree. So what's an opportunity tree? An opportunity tree links your desired outcome at the top, which is what we want to move, to the opportunities that we've just discovered through our discovery, to solutions or outputs. I like having outcomes, opportunities, outputs, because, you know, alliteration is cool. And so, yeah, we'll come back to how we figured out the outputs in a moment, but I find this a really good way to structure all those learnings that we were having. The other cool thing we did is, so now that we'd sized out the opportunities, we figured out, hey, these are the ones that are worth pursuing. And we made them rock stars. We made them into flashcards so that when we're communicating with stakeholders, we can give them a jazzy name like, hey, we're focusing on the righto problem. And it's quite fun to hear that communication between stakeholders. Because, you know, sometimes if you're focused on a problem, it can be quite depressing, but we like to reframe it as, hey, this is my opportunity that I'm working on. Yeah, and what I found is that it makes it really clear to our stakeholders what we're working on and why we're doing it, because we put them together. So now we've figured out these opportunities that are worth pursuing. Well, how do we explore them? How do we find the right outputs to achieve the outcomes? What we did is we held a massive ideation session. Thanks, Dan, you're nodding. And so that was the 20 people that had over 10 plus different job titles. So we had a good diversity of thought in the room. And they came up with over 200 ideas, which is a lot. And then we did a bit of, you know, basic effort value sizing to really narrow down to a good pool of options. A really cool little trick that we used in this workshop was that we had these idea cards. And so at a high level, you could quickly look at, hey, this is the idea, but it also answers, you know, some questions to make sure, is this, you know, going to chin the bar in terms of achieving the outcome that we want? So we looked at, you know, some basic desirability, feasibility, and viability while thinking about the ideas to really, you know, make sure that we were solving the problem. And then what we did is with that really short list of ideas, we ran these things called discovery sprints to understand those top ideas a little bit further. So what's a discovery sprint? I mean, we've all worked in Agile, but it's what we've called it is a 2-week period where we're really focused on a learning outcome. You know, you don't have to succeed all the time. We really just wanted to focus on, are we getting the, are we learning what we need to learn about, is this solution going to work or is it not going to work? And so what our discovery did is we broke down into many things. Some solutions were really focused around data science. So our data scientists and lead software engineers really pulled together to learn, hey, what are the risks and assumptions here? And then we also had some solutions that were very design heavy. And so our designers and people like me, the product manager, would jump in and really focus on those things. But the main goal was really about learning, wasn't about anything else. And how we did this is we used just general Scrum practices like stand-up plannings and retros to just make sure that our discovery process was structured. I would thoroughly recommend that if you're doing a bunch of like very intense discovery. And so, yeah, we have these things here called opportunity canvases. And that was part of the goal of our discovery, is we were trying to fill out this canvas. So what is this thing? It succinctly tells, you know, us what's the problem, what's the idea, and what's the outcome we're looking for at a super high level. And at TradeMe, we use these and compare different ideas from different areas so that we're speaking one language, we're speaking one template, so that it's quite easy to see what's going on. Yeah. And so, yeah, when we were doing these discovery sprints, we were really looking at the risks and assumptions, you know, how do we de-risk this so that when we get to delivering the thing, like, you know, how's that going to go? So what was the outcome of these discovery sprints? Well, we ran 3 of them and we explored 10 ideas in depth and we discarded 2 of them, which I am super proud of. We should always be proud that we learned quickly that, hey, that's not the path to pursue. And 2 of the ideas in that we actually pivoted because we learned something in our risks and assumptions. And that made us go, hey, we need to think about this a little bit differently. And then we got a really good understanding of each opportunity. And then we were like, hey, these discovery sprints are working pretty well. Maybe we just continue with this process, keep learning about other things. Like we're putting together a bit of a business case. How does the commercial model work for that? Or how might we experiment? That model just seemed to work for us as a bit of a team. Yeah, and what this led us to was it was so easy to plan and prioritize when you've done a bit of discovery into a few different things. So yeah, we learnt, we iterated, and we celebrated our milestones as a team. So yeah, one of the photos up there is we did a mystery tea drinking session together. We had to find what was in the tea or guess, which is a little bit different. But when you've got people that are driving the ideas and the opportunities, they're so motivated. Like, I cannot describe to you how motivated our team was in figuring this stuff out. And then, yeah, as I said before, we did a whole bunch of retros and we talked about, hey, what's going well and what's not going so well. So as I said, I thought the structure worked well, and yep, someone else said the same thing. So yeah, putting a bit of structure around your discovery can really help you along the way. So now that we've done our discovery, we've found our opportunities, and we've, started planning and prioritizing them, well, how do we tell people about what we've done? How do we bring people on the journey? I think the important thing to note is, because we were working in sprints, we shared our learnings throughout our journey. So with our squad, some of you guys are here, we shared insights with them and joined in at their sprint reviews so they could learn, hey, customers are doing this thing, and we could share it straight away. And then by the time we got to our quarterly kickoffs, we reiterated them. So they were really brought along the journey with us. The other thing that we've done is we shared regularly with our key stakeholders at a fortnightly meeting, and we pulled all of these prioritized opportunities together into a business case, it looks pretty good. Yeah, and what we found is we also shared some of our process learnings about what was going well in discovery sprints and maybe what wasn't going so well. So in terms of what can you apply to your product practice from this talk? So as I said before, we noticed that the power of combining insights from different sources is just incredible. So use those different tools that you've got, combine them together, and you'll end up with something great on the other side. Another important point is use your data for research too. So yeah, that smidge analysis really helped us pull together those hypotheses that we explored. So maybe think about your data in a different way to what you have before. Then the other learning is there is strength in diverse, focused, cross-functional teams. I think we got a really good result at the end of the day because we worked together so well as a team. And yeah, what we did is we thought it was worth spending the time to really understand the problem space and dive deep into lots of different opportunities, because that's made us more resilient. If one thing doesn't work, we're ready to pick up the next thing. Yeah, and what's really cool is we're really confident in, and our stakeholders are really confident in the approach we're taking because we took the time to figure this out. So yeah, thanks for listening to a bit of our journey on how we did discovery into findability. Yeah, huge. Can we do a big round of applause for Emma? I hope she's listening in because she put so much work in. Yeah, so that's it from me. And feel free to ask me any questions about our process or anything that you've seen today.
Any questions for?
Oh, you're right there. I might as well.
You mentioned you had 10 ideas before. What was the scale of those ideas and the intent of one?
That's a really good question. So in terms of scale of ideas, what we did was we had those opportunities that we've listed, and we wanted to make sure, hey, are we covering our bases? Are we doing enough to make sure that are we going to address those customer problems in the right way? In terms of 10 ideas, you can only get through so much. So I think we've got enough of a backlog with that amount for what we're trying to achieve and the scale of our team. But, I think it would all depend on what's the size of your team, what's your capacity, have you got enough of a backlog to be able to filter that through. All right, question at the back. All right, I'll run to you, It's more fun. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah.
I guess obviously Tracy's got a massive team, and you guys can build in a lot of people to work on these kind of ideas. What advice would you give to companies? I guess a lot of people here are companies online. How do you do the same kind of findability discovery with smaller teams?
That's a really good question. Being at TradeMe was working in smaller businesses. And you'd be surprised that you can work with a whole bunch of different people that may not necessarily be super technical. You can be sitting close to your CX team or your customer service team or your sales team, and they can help you pull together some of these things. The main thing is having different people thinking about things from different perspectives is what drove us forward. We would actually include some of those people in some of our sessions. And yeah, we do have the luxury of resource, but at a small business, you've got more than you think. So don't discount those sorts of knowledge.
Yeah.
No, that's all right.
First of all, thank you for that. It's so great to hear that teams are given enough time to do discovery properly. So I can relate to that previous question. I had a question that maybe more for Emma. So with the data, that's kind of granular user journey data that you're collecting, did you do any kind of overlapping with other data? Maybe find some correlations, some patterns in a variety of user journeys, and also with the empathy building to maybe fight the bias that comes in with empathy as well?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely an Emma question, but I'll do my best answering it. So yeah, she pulled together data from a different range of sources. And then what we did is we used those hypotheses, and yes, we looked into way more data. So we'd be like, hey, maybe customers are repeating themselves. Can we look at that at scale and see what kinds of things are they doing? So I think it's the power of combining the big with the small and making sure that, yeah, having one insight is good, but having like three that point you in the good direction is quite helpful. But yeah, I can hit Emma up if you want to learn more about her exact process. Yeah, cool.
I think I remember rightly, you said earlier on when you were looking at the opportunities, you actually prioritize the opportunities. Can you elaborate on more on how you think?
Yeah, so what we did is, because we'd built our customer journey and we knew where the biggest pain points were in that tied in to where our biggest opportunities in the data were. So it made it very clear what we needed to do, right? One of the problems up there is showing the customer the right item is quite challenging. That's probably something you need to do to buy something, right? So we really focused on, where was our biggest customer problem in terms of the qual? We looked at the quant as well, and both of those matched up to be like, hey, you need to focus there. So I think when you have a lot of different data points, it becomes really obvious.
Thank you. Again, excellent presentation. One question from me was around the solution validation. So again, coming to the theme of smaller businesses, you get one chance to do the validation. So you either tend to do the problem validation, then go with a bunch of assumptions based on those. Otherwise, you do combine the problem and solution validation together. So how did you guys go about validating the ideas that you came up with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We did a whole bunch of looking. So yeah, when we'd done our discovery, we pulled out what are the most risky assumptions that we're making, and we might test this. So with one of the ideas we discarded really fast, what we did was we were like, hey, maybe we could save particular, refinements that people were using, because it's quite frustrating if people are having to repeat themselves, right? And we took a look at that. Maybe we could do that. But it turns out they'd only be seeing a really small subset of items in terms of that. And I'm like, that's probably not great for the marketplace overall. So we were able to do that really fast. I think that took maybe half an hour to figure that one out and discount that idea and pivot it onto something else. So I think making sure you're looking at what is the thing that could make this thing fail and really focusing in on that risk. That's what helped us move really quickly, because you can stop looking at that thing and move on to the next thing. Oh, here we go.
How are you approaching the next phase? Just going to go build stuff now?
Nicole, that is a leading question. So I think if we think about what's our focus is learning, right? So we're going to be trialing some stuff. Our team's already starting to build some things. We'll pop them out there, but we're going to still be discovering things along the way. Some things are going to work and some things are not. And so, product discovery, it doesn't just stop. My favorite book is Continuous Discovery Habits. I promise I'm not paid to plug that. I just do all the time. And yeah, discovery is just continuous. So our team will be working with those insights to keep that process going. Yes, we were very privileged and very lucky to have this period of time to really dive into the customer problems. Totally get it in small business that you don't always have that luxury, but you do the best you can.
Awesome. All right, I'll just look a bit well. It's pretty great to see what can be done when you've got the Atkins resources and permission. Interesting. There we go. We're on. Awesome. Hey, thank you very much for having me. So I am going to talk a little bit today about the discovery, or at least trial by fire, of starting a business from scratch. A bit less of the luxury that you talked about there, and probably a bit more financial stress on the way. But somewhat of a very iterative journey that where at least we set out didn't have a clear product we wanted to build, but we knew the industry and we knew the problem, and had to find the solution on the way through. So I'll talk to kind of how that unfolded. So my business partner and I actually didn't come from the automotive industry at all. We both worked in food. He was one of the early employees at my food bag, and at the time was the chief operating officer, and I was running the Uber Eats business in New Zealand. But we found ourselves one evening after, I guess, hearing a few somewhat harrowing experiences of friends and families dealing with their car repairs, about the industry. And quickly sort of were discussing how somewhat archaic it was. And I think a few of these ads kind of illustrate that at the time, which was all of a year or two ago, how out of touch they were with sort of the consumer movement and perceptions. So we were looking at things like this, going, there's got to be a better way. So we decided to dive. So obviously you start with a little bit of macro research. And look, it won't be any surprise to people in this room. There's about 3.5 million sort of small privately owned passenger transport vehicles in New Zealand. That puts us at about the 3rd highest per capita in the world. And what's more, they're old as well. Our average vehicle age is about 15 years old. And when you look at somewhere like Australia at about 10 or Canada at 8, we're running a huge archaic fleet. And it's a wild world where our maintenance industry isn't set up to serve it either. There's about 4,600 odd independent mechanics, typically owned by people that are nearer to 60 than they are to 30, and somewhat reluctant to change. And as consumers, and definitely people in this room, we're demanding more in terms of the experience that we get, both online and offline from a customer service point of view as well. So we said, hell, this feels like a spot for us. And so we did a bit of qualitative research, and you can see
some of these problems started to emerge. 55% of Kiwis say it's hard to find a mechanic you can trust. Well, in other studies, they were in the bottom 3 sort of industries for trust. And it's a shame because everyone's out there genuinely to do good, but because there's this information asymmetry that exists, where the mechanic knows so much about your car, and generally, if you're like me, know very little, you've got to trust them. And then they'll tell you a price for whatever repairs you're getting. And you've got no idea in the first place, do you even need that repair, let alone what that suspension bush is, or should it cost $300? So there's this huge gap and people get even more worried about you taking for a ride. And then finally, you talk to a few people, and if you've ever had to take your car to the mechanic, you go do this weird juggling act in the morning where your partner might follow you down there in the car, and then you jump back in, and maybe they drop you off somewhere else, and then you do this reverse on the way back. We said, well, that doesn't make sense either, especially with the advent of doorstep delivery and contractors all over the place that are running than it costs for an Uber time. So naturally, we had read enough books and lived and breathed from some of the Facebook mantras of move fast and break things and get in there and learn while you go, with kind of 3 somewhat solutions that we wanted to test. Now, the first being a smart pricing algorithm. The reality is there's great data accessible in all sorts of shapes and forms. And we were able to go, okay, well, if we tap into a couple of APIs, we reckon we can provide an upfront for any repair on any vehicle, giving the consumer this power back when they walk into a workshop, or if they're looking online, that they know their brake pads for their Subaru Outback should only cost $230, not $758. So we wanted to test that. Maybe I got a little carried away coming from my Uber Eats background, but we also wanted to create a pick up and drop off solution with independent contractors using e-scooters, shooting out to offices or homes, putting the scooter in the back of the car and taking it to a workshop so that you could carry on with your day seamlessly. And then we also wanted to develop effectively a customer intermediary or advocacy tool. So while you were dealing with somewhat of an anxious full transaction, we were there alongside you with an educated brain that you could tap on and go, hey, does this sound right on the way through? So early 2020, we jumped in, we contracted a small digital agency to build us a very grassroots MVP, and decided, hey, we'd start by doing. So there's myself, and Sasha was fresh out of uni and thought coming on a startup journey was going to be a great time. He was so young and naive then. He's still with us now, and looks a bit more worn. So as you can see, we kicked off, 16th of Jan 2020, which if you're a startup and you're growing a business then that's not in some sort of COVID enticing industry, it was a really bad decision. So promptly about 2.5 months later, we had to shut our doors. But through this time, we did the really labor-intensive stuff. We had 3 workshops that we were funneling cars into. We were talking to everyone. We had Excel spreadsheets left, right, and center, trying to track who was doing what and trying to figure out how Salesforce worked, and learned the industry as we went, which was really valuable for a couple of guys that came from food. But then, of course, when you're in a business where you want people to be using their cars and driving around, and our lovely Prime Minister tells everyone to stay home, it doesn't work so well for your business. So promptly 2.5 months in, we're back at the table virtually from home, saying, all right, well, what does the future look like? Do our existing hypotheses or attack plans still make sense. Now, the classic of a pick-up and drop-off model with e-scooters suddenly went out the window because people were very anxious about someone else driving their car or touching their things. And funnily enough, they were also had all this abundance or perceived abundance of free time. So suddenly getting to the office at 8 and leaving at 5 suddenly felt a bit less like handcuffed. So we had to reassess them. But fortunately, one of the great things was our pricing algorithm was really starting to hit. And we knew people loved the transparency and some of the feedback loops that were coming through about some of the workshops, knowing how much they should pay and having that faith that they weren't going to get taken for a ride or get given that surprise bill at the end. So we built a marketplace. So we ended up through the subsequent about year and a half building a marketplace with about 300 mechanics all around the country. We had brilliant feedback loops going on. We were funneling work in their doors at times when they were nervous about how they were going to fill their shops, especially through lockdown. And we had customers that were going, hey, this is great. I can see everyone that's typically in a small shed down a back street that I'd never know existed, and see that they're actually getting 5 stars time and time again, and they're fantastic people. And this was a brilliant journey, and we grew it to doing hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue every month. But then our next came along. Suddenly, these mechanics were all at capacity, and our borders were still shut. And our marketplace, where we were sending work into these workshops and taking a small commission off each job, were saying, hey, we can't even serve our own customers, let alone serve. We're going, all right, well, the marketplace is fantastic and we've got all this transparency, but our industry doesn't want to do the work that we're serving them. All right, we're back to the drawing board. And so we were sitting there with this fantastic website that had 50, 60, 70,000 people a month coming to it. And it's not one of those websites like Trade Me that you just go and enjoy browsing and looking at that nice car. You don't go looking for brake pads just out of interest. So these were high intent people that were genuinely looking for work to get done on their car. So we're sitting there and go, okay, well, if we've got that work, let's do it ourselves. So in January this year, we launched effectively our own workshops on wheels that came full circle back to solving this convenience problem. Now, the beauty of these guys is that they're completely tech powered. So those vans have Wi-Fi, they have printers, they have apps which we've developed that are all custom built to give full transparency to the customer. You get a digital report afterwards with photos, videos, tips, commentary around each bit of work that's been done. And we came right back to being focused heavily on the customer. And fortunately, it feels like we've found that kind of needle in the haystack that we were looking for all along and having to jump back and forward. Our marketplace business still remains, but it feels like the last couple of years, we've followed this sort of chart, which I'm sure some of you have seen before. We saw those guys in the earlier news article when we were ripping it here, and then quickly lockdown hit. We went right down here, tried to figure it out in the trough of sorrow before I would like to think we're kicking around over here, just about as we, well, I look quite happy, so maybe we're up above this line now. Or maybe it's just the drinks and the snacks. And it's a really real thing. And I reflect on these times where we were trying different things and going, yeah, we've hit it. Oh, no, we haven't. Oh, there's a new factor that we didn't consider. And I feel like the product discovery process can be very much like that as well, where you're talking to customers and getting these reads, and sometimes they can be false. The amount of customers that say they and do another can be quite different. Now, the question people are always asking is, well, how do you know that you're here, not here? And what does product market fit look like? Because I thought we'd had it about 3 times on the way through. And look, I might still be proven wrong. But the thing that sort of resonated is we started to get these really genuine reviews coming through. And these reviews that were ones that just had people just sharing with their friends. And look, car repair is not a sexy dinner time conversation. But the people were saying, hey, you should use, saying to their family and friends, look, service, and you can look how detailed these were coming through. This is one, I put this in here about 5 days ago, but they were just time and time again rolling through. And it went from this feeling of kind of a bit of square peg, round hole. Is this right? We think this is the right solution. Oh, wow. And it was, I guess, like somewhat of a relief, but also oh, wow, we've actually created something of real value that solves the real problem. And to be honest, especially coming from a tech background where it was always going to be a beautiful digital solution, where it was going to be really hands-off, you build it, it would scale infinitely. Now we have to buy vans and we have to kit them out and we have to hire staff. But at the end of the day, the customer gets better service. And that, I think, has been one of my big realizations, is that actually sometimes trying to force your ideal business model to solve the problem you have actually needs a slightly different business model. So we now have, of these guys, we have just hired another 3 in the last 2 weeks. We've got a team of about 20 in the last 7 months. We've just expanded into Wellington a couple of months ago, sorry, operating in launching in Christchurch in about 2 weeks, and big fleet in Auckland as well. So then the question goes, what's next? Now, one of the pieces that I always think about is, if you've got something good, double down on it. And so we're going to keep doing what we're doing. But I think as we rewind back to what I was saying at the start, where the industry is so archaic, we think we're going to get a real head start here with these puppies. And the reality is, because there's this reluctance to adapt, the cost of retraining is expensive, we're laying some foundation in the background that when the market goes from being just 1% EVs and hybrids to 10, 20%, we'll be well set up to service them and their needs. There's some funny going on that we don't think about, like in, in August, 14% of the cars that came in were Toyota Aquas. And out of Japan with these big batteries, 10 years old, we don't actually know the state of those batteries, and we have no good way of testing them. So there's things like that we're building at the moment to be able to address this sort of fleet in the future, and we think we'll have the foundation of the go-to place for car repair for the EVs, or of course the existing ICE fleet as well. Naturally, I've got to do a bit of a shameless plug here as well. You're all part of the Trade Me family since you're in here, and hopefully you've all got Trade Me accounts. But if you use that promo code, you can get $50 off your first service or repair. So give our guys a go down here, and we'd love to blow your socks off. Happy to take any questions on the way through. Hold it.
Oh. Sorry, mate. So what's happened to your pricing algorithm?
Not that.
So what's happened to your pricing algorithm? Are you still using it?
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So the same foundations that were built for the marketplace apply to our business. So we're using the quoting tools that we built for all our network of mechanics to be able to upfront quote for our work as well. The marketplace still remains. It services a lot of the regions which we're not in, and obviously for some of the jobs that we can't do in some of the bigger cities as well. And then if we visit cars and we can't complete the repairs, we feed it into our network as well. So it's kind of like a nice circular loop. The algorithms are just slowly getting more complex. They get, as our small dev team gets pulled between about a dozen different things, and then now they've got a bunch of mechanics that come banging on their door without much finesse when their app doesn't work. They find that yeah, they're just balancing it all.
Yeah. You mentioned that the band sort of came out with a bunch of stuff and all those systems. But apps themselves and the band sound like there's a lot of independent development. Like, sorry, what did that even look like? What features did that? How did you go from that to, I guess, like to the new product?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question as well. So that in itself was a huge discovery process, and probably more force driven by need as opposed to well calculated. And hopefully the team aren't watching too much, but it's probably the back end's pretty ropey. And because we keep changing it, and so like our scheduling tool is version 2.1.3 or something, whatever our head of tech has come up with. And it changes sort of every month because we're still figuring out, well, hey, this worked well when we had 3 vans, but now we've got 15 and maybe it doesn't. Or now we're operating across 4 markets and it doesn't anymore. So we're kind of reluctant to create anything that's really, I guess, like, it's got to be really stable, but really like concrete and polished. Now that's all the internal facing stuff. The external facing stuff, obviously, we want to look fantastic. So yeah, I don't know if that quite answers your question, but it's a hell of a journey.
Earlier on, you were talking about sort of Excel spreadsheets and behind the scenes and stuff, but I've heard this about marketplaces in the past where the front end, like you say, looks slick, but in the background, it's just a bunch of booths, like get prices from this. How much of that was your journey, and do you think that's like a legitimate thing for companies trying to start up, going, hey, we've got to do, like we've heard this about machine learning a lot of times, you know, it's just 100 people trying to look up themselves. So what's the legitimacy of that, and is it something people can use as their learning on how?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll probably have to give a parts trader plug in there somewhere for you, won't I? I guess couple of points in there. First one, don't underestimate the power of Excel spreadsheets, and I'm sure there's some big advocates in there. And more so Google Sheets. Cycle back to my days at Uber Eats, and our pricing algorithm, or search pricing algorithm, was running off a spreadsheet, operating in many countries across the world and doing many hundreds of thousands of orders across Australia and New Zealand. But I think the nature of that is we didn't want to, and we still don't want to invest too much effort too early in productizing things when we know they're going to change. And we still know that the plan is to have about 50 of these things in another sort of 12 months. And that's going to need a very different sort of set of product to what running 10 looks like. So that's why we kind of hack it together until you find, okay, yeah, this feels about right and it's not going to change. And that's when you can productize. And I think that's probably the sort of difference in there. But you can probably run these hacky solutions for a lot longer than you think. Or you look at some of these businesses, and I know on the outside they look amazing, but then the inside is this sort of level of semi-organized chaos, which I'm sure everyone can relate to.
What are your thresholds for validation of something before you go into it? You're on the cusp of saying we can spend X amount on building something. That depends on how big X is, right? But how many possible signal products do that?
I'd love to say it's perfect science. It's probably a hot debate within the team. Is probably one part of it, and then we try and draw on what data points we can. And so there'll be the anecdotal stuff, there'll be the and sort of the feedback loops, and we did surveys back. We held kind of focus groups around different product bits and pieces, which were put on some beers or some wine and get your friends round, and then try and get them to talk sense or stop talking to each other for a while, and then effectively go, okay, well, we're going to commit, and then try and do it as lean as possible at the start. And then you kind of get this read back and forward. But yeah, I don't have a perfect art to it, unfortunately. I think the process that Jenny talked through is probably much better. Oh, go for it, Andrew.
I'm just going to build on that and picture maybe if we take the example of designs that you're going to try and then
yeah.
Then it's quite a significant investment to do that full scale. So we
yep. Yeah, that's fair. So that one that was hotly debated for a while, because you can imagine the dynamic of operating your own service as also a marketplace provider. And you can see some of the backlash that the likes of Amazon have got, where they start copying woolen shoes, for example, and that kind of thing. The reality was there was probably two parts to that. One is the business pressure, whereby the marketplace was sort of struggling under the weight of the work that we needed to put into it, and we needed it to deliver, and because of the labour constraints we're struggling to. And then we effectively wrote a business case that was, hey, this is what it can look like, this is what effectively the commercials look like, and that was sort of the deciding factor. And then we said, all right, well, let's do one, and let's see if all our commercial assumptions are right. And we were able to do it like, we're buying, this was a hacky setup at the start. It looked great on the outside, but you're sort of using oil and 5-litre containers and that kind of thing until you got the proper setup. And fortunately, the commercials off the backside were really good. And then those customer feedback responses were the ones that we went, oh, wow. And then they said, hey, so-and-so did, I needed someone else. Told my family, told my friends. And then you went, oh, wow, that feels like a thing. And you marry the commercials with the fit. And that was sort of the go. Yeah.
My question was around resilience, and I thought kind of back out that you just keep trying different things, that you weren't like overly attached to everything that you were doing. Do you have any advice for product teams around having resilience and not being overly attached to ideas?
Have in my case, a business partner, or have a team. You may have seen the chart that sort of goes like that, and it looks like a sort of alternating piece of DNA where one person's down and one person's up. And it's safe to say that Richard, my business partner, and I were often at different ends, and convinced me something was a good idea at a time where I didn't think it was, and vice versa. So I definitely relied a lot on him for that, and vice versa, and the whole team as well. And yeah, it's really hard when, I mean, like, your thing's your baby and you're trying to grow it, and then suddenly it doesn't work, and your hypothesis is proven wrong, and actually having a bunch of drivers with these e-scooters is not going to be a thing, and we've just had to sell all the e-scooters, and it's sort of like getting rid of the last attachment. So yeah, it is a bit of a journey in that way, but use the other people to go, hey, look, the next thing's going to be even better, which is also a dangerous place to be if you're always chasing the next thing and the next thing.
One thing was about competition, like as you're doing all this pivoting, how do you keep track of what the other is doing, and is there anybody else trying to do what you're doing? So how do you keep up with what's the competition doing?
That's a fair question. Fortunately, based on the industry we're playing in, there's not a lot of dramatic innovation. Some of the probably more the thing we need to keep an eye on is, I guess, what I touched on at the end with the EV and hybrid space and where that's going and how we best set up for the future. And the reality is the manufacturers and the like are trying to hold a lot of that close to their chest. But we know they're not going to be able to serve it. If you look at the likes of Tesla in the US and the backlogs they have on servicing and repair on taking care of them, some of them extend months, and servicing in areas which they don't can be challenging as well. So it's best probably setting up for them in 2 to 3 years. There are a few small competitors that are popping up around the place trying to do somewhat similar things. But we think our combination of having a dev team that's so close to a team of mechanics and then an ops team all in the same place is creating quite a unique, cool outcome for the customer as well.
Time for one more question. Anyone has one?
Hi, pretty inspiring so far. Just with regard to most mechanical shops that rely on brand, but not much transparency. And what I've seen here is a lot of transparency and customer feedback. Sort of building the brand, but not the line. So where does my auto shop fit in with regard to brand like dealer versus process dealer?
It's a good question. Let me see if I can piece something together. As I don't know if I probably have the perfect answer either. I think there's an element here of, as we talked about, like the trust factor. Now, we don't want to build trust by developing a really close relationship, but we want to build trust in the sense that we live up to what the expectations that you've got, and we let everyone else do the talking for us as well. So by creating these feedback loops and highlighting that, it means, okay, I can trust because everyone else has done the same thing. And I bought a service for X amount and I got what I expected from that, which I think is incredibly important. That often chops and changes a bit, or the number at the end, where you get these sort of unpleasant surprises. I think brand's important, especially in a space where, like you said, very little in a very fragmented marketplace. There's not much brands that are able to, I guess, stand out and above. The ones that do the likes of the AA, but that's been around for however long. So it's something which we think we can build a bit of an advantage. But the kicker is again, a brand is something which in this industry is not necessarily really talked about or recognized. It's more of a need. So a lot of our marketing is actually reactive focused, very SEO driven, SEM driven, because again, dinner table chat isn't necessarily, hey, I love this brand because they fix my car, like the same way you love Allbirds because they make great shoes. So that's a bit of the challenge that we have in terms of marketing our business, which I'm all ears. I'm no marketing expert, and I'm sure there's some better people here, so please let me know. Thank you.
Awesome. Big round of applause,
Thanks, guys.
Thank everyone, and great to have you.